Good morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cam, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios here in Morristown, New Jersey. My guest today is on a mission to help those high-wage earners and or retirees that have been forgotten about by so many in society. He is determined to help you, yes you, feel comfortable and confident going against conventional wisdom by being okay with investing in real assets and doing that beyond your backyard. He is Billy Keels. Billy, welcome to the show.
Mr. Ham, man, this is really, really fantastic. I'm looking forward to a conversation with you. I love what you do, and I love the way that you make this fun and educational for everybody that's listening to the Morning Spotlight, man. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's always nice to hear because that is the ultimate goal of this show, to have fun, but also be educational, entertaining, the whole kind of thing. And just no pressure. But that first conversation that we had, like our little intro call, I was like, I love this guy. But so the first conversation, this conversation has a lot to live up to from that first conversation. So, but I trust that you can handle it because you're a pro. You have your own podcast, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So I'm excited too, and I appreciate you coming on. So you, while you may sound like you're from the United States, which you are not calling in from the United States today, are you?
I am not calling in from the United States, but hey, listen, Mike, one thing really quickly before I even go to start talking about where I live and all that kind of good stuff. I just want to talk to everybody that is already listening and watching you constantly, because what you started during the beginning of the pandemic has really, really caught on, and you do such a great job. And everybody that is watching and listening to you should at least take a moment, if they haven't already, to leave you an honest written review and a rating, because what you put out is phenomenal. So please take a second just to do that. I know Mike puts a lot of love into this podcast, really wants to connect with everybody. And so if you have not already, take just a couple seconds, leave him an honest written review and a rating. So sorry about that, man. I wanted to share that, man, because I know what you do is really awesome.
And I very rarely ask. So it's always good when other people ask for me. So even better. Yeah. So I appreciate it. So you're not calling in from America.
No, I'm not
calling in from.
Yeah, so I'm from Ohio, getting back to what you asked me. Sorry, that happens to me. I've been in sales for a really long time, so I get kind of sidetracked sometimes. I live in a place called Barcelona, Spain. Or Barcelona, Spain, home of the 1992 Olympic Games. Did not ever plan on living here, but because of life and just giving myself a couple of opportunities to kind of go with the flow, I've been living here for the last 15 years, man. 15 years.
15 years. Were you living any other place prior to Barcelona besides the United States, or did you move directly from the United States to Barcelona?
So, man, I had this right out of college. So I guess we can pick up at college. Right out of college, I went to college at Miami of Ohio in the southwest of Ohio, and I had this amazing job, just wild. And I had the opportunity to work and travel throughout some 58 countries in 5 years. And so it just absolutely opened my mind to things that I never, ever thought of. I'm from the Midwest, man. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, like I said. And so after that job, 5 years, 58 countries, I was looking to do something different because I didn't see myself in a normal, quote unquote, 9-to-5 job. And so I was accepted at a university in Paris, France called the Sorbonne. And it was supposed to be a 1-year sabbatical. I wanted to go there. The idea was I was going to learn French language and culture. I wanted to learn how to salsa dance, and I wanted to learn more about wines. I don't know why, but those three things are what I wanted to do.
Very cultured, extremely cultured. Yes.
Yeah, especially the wine drinking and the salsa dancing. That was right. the coolest part. No, that was. But then after that, I left Paris. I moved down to the south, a place called Montpellier. I was there for about 2.5 years. In the meantime, they also sent me to Italy. I started working in IT sales and sales leadership. I was in Sardinia, just north, the Italian island, just north of Sicily, for about 7 months. Then I went back to France, and then I moved because I met this really cool, cute woman from Spain, and she thought I was cool and cute as well, I guess, or handsome, I don't know. And then she didn't want to go back to France. I ended up coming here to Barcelona, and I've been living here ever since. Got married, have 2 kids. And so my 1-year sabbatical, I like to say, has turned into a 20-year one marriage, 2 kids, and 3 countries, and 4 additional languages.
Wow.
So
yeah, which I find crazy. So did you travel a lot prior to that, or you just got this job as? I mean, what was this job? Was it IT sales, or were you a pilot? Were you an international spy? Like, what was this job?
No, I wasn't an international spy. I still
I
don't
mean,
know
if
how.
you told me, you'd probably have to kill me anyway if that
Well,
was,
I
yeah.
wouldn't have to do that, of course, Mike, because I like you. I think you're great.
I appreciate that. Yeah. But you have to say no, obviously. I get that. But so tell me what the job was.
So I was working as the title of the role was actually travel director. And so what I used to do is like there were these like really big companies have these like winner circle or president's club for the top producers. And so they're usually going to these really exotic destinations and it's this 5-star hotel, wonderful treatment. And so at the time, this was the late 90s into early 2000, there were people that actually put these programs together. So like they spent a year planning this like 10-day trip or 5-day trip or whatever. And then they handed all of this training or all of the like years worth of planning, they handed it over to the travel director. So my job, believe this, between 21 and 26 was to be the advanced person in exotic destinations around the world, these 5-star hotels, and make sure that when the corporate execs and their top producers would arrive to these places, that everything went as planned. So it was amazing because I never ever imagined that type of a role. A lot of them don't exist anymore because this was at the time when a lot of companies were able to have lots of expenses and things like that and invest in these types of things. But it was great. I mean, because it gave me also insight into how big corporations were treating their employees. And some of them, I talked about the incentive travel, which really was one part. And then the other part, Mike, was business meetings. So we would see like American Express travel advisors, and there were 25,000 of them in Honolulu, Hawaii. And so we were there to advance this 25,000 person. I had a team of about 350 people. And for 4 days of business meetings, we had to make sure that everyone was getting from the hotel to the VIP meetings to all of the logistics. And it was phenomenal, man. And I guess that whole opportunity, what it taught me was for 25 to 28 days a month, one day you could be in Honolulu, the next day you were in Las Vegas, 2 weeks after that you're in Johannesburg. And it was just, it helped me to open my mind and my perspective to so many things that I never, ever honestly even imagined were possible because of where I come from.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about where you come from because I think that that's a really interesting part of the story because like what I find crazy is that you said I think you said that you didn't really have much of a travel background prior to doing this job, so they're going to take this 21-year-old kid and just jet set you around the country so that other people can have fun, but in doing this job you're having fun. So tell me like what the transition was like from going from kind of where you came from to what this job provided you and as far as like worldly experiences.
Yeah, so and I guess part of it is if I kind of look back, like I was born in Columbus, Ohio. Then after I was born, we moved to Denver, Colorado. My brother and sister were then born a couple years later. Then we moved to Texas. My parents had we were in Texas for a while. They ended up having marital problems. They separated. We went back to Ohio. My dad stayed in Texas. They eventually reconciled. That eventually didn't work out at all. And then my dad moved to the East Coast. My mom moved to West Virginia. And so I guess kind of we traveled around a little bit when from birth to about 13 years old when we went back to Ohio, but we weren't really big travelers. Like we didn't go to Europe or we didn't go to California or anything like that. We did a trip to Disney World earlier on, but so I didn't have a huge like travel culture, but I guess I was used to moving to new places and adapting. And so that just kind of culture, I guess, was inside of me, but I never imagined that it would go to a point where I was literally traveling around the world and taking care of logistics for very large multinational companies. So,
Right.
yeah, but that's kind of my background, as extensive as my travel background was. But then since then, I've just literally fallen in love with being able to travel and meet new people and just challenge myself and the way that I think about the world. And it's probably even one of the reasons that I'm doing something today from an investment perspective that most people would consider sometimes really, really against the norm or contrarian or sometimes just absolutely nutty.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good way to describe it. So let's talk about the idea of like what you're not the idea, what you're doing now and kind of how that started. And then we'll kind of get into why people do consider it a little bit off the beaten path, we'll say. Not nutty. We'll do
Yeah,
it
yeah.
off the beaten path.
Off the beaten path. Okay, off the beaten path. So I guess like one of the things is Mike, I am, and I've realized like I grew up being an A student. Like I was the person who got the good grades, and I did what the teacher said, and I colored in the lines, and all of those things. I am a recovering perfectionist today, And one of the things that happens is when you are an A student and you do what you're told, you also follow the same path as most people. And so one of those paths that I always heard was you want to make sure that you get really good grades, you get a good job, you move up the ladder. And then when you do your financial life, you want to make sure that you're maxing out on your retirement plans, 401ks, when that's maxed out, going to IRAs and do all of those types of things. And so as an A student, and today a recovering perfectionist, I did what I was told. And so I was doing everything that I was told, and I was getting the right job, and I was traveling around the world, and I was moving up and having more responsibility and leading teams and managing businesses and things like that. And eventually, this thing in 2000 came around where the bubble popped, right? The dot-com bubble popped. And so that whole part of my financial life, which I never, like for me, the way that I grew up, if someone actually saved money, that was considered investing. So just to kind of the group, the environment that I grew up in. So just to also kind of paint that picture. But then afterwards, when I was doing all the things that I was told, the bubble popped. What I was told from my financial advisor at the time was, hey, listen, this is part of the cycle and this is what happens. And, we're just going to continue to dollar cost average. And I didn't know what that meant. And it basically meant you're just able to buy more because it was cheaper, or if you lost a lot of value. That's kind of the way that I was looking at it. And then over time, it was going to come back. And you know what? That actually happened. And so as an A student, I was really happy because, it's in 2006, 2007, things were working out. And I was back to where I was in 2008. And then in 2000. And then 2008 happened. And in 2008, I lost 33% of my portfolio value. And I was just crushed. I was like, hang on, this stinks. Like, I am doing what I was told. I'm an A student. I was told to put this portion, and I'm doing it, and I'm resetting. I'm back to where I was back in before 2000. And I just got really frustrated, Mike. And it was right around that time. I don't remember it specifically, but I came across this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, on one of my trips back to the United States. And it was in my dad and stepmom's place in their bookshelf. And I picked it up and I started reading. And I was like, wow, this seems pretty cool. But I put it down. And it wasn't for a couple of years later that I actually I read it end to end. And I was like, this is amazing. I can actually have more control over my financial life. I can make $200 to $300 a door. And this is something that I can scale. Now, I was working a day job, and I'm still working a day job. Like, I work in a really demanding corporate sales exec job for an industry-leading enterprise software company. And so it's really, really demanding. But at the same time, this was the way in getting into real assets and investing in real estate initially, and now I'm doing a bunch of other things. That was a way for me to have control. It was a way to also be able to build predictable streams of income in the future. And that was something that helped me as a really conservative investor, really made a lot of sense to me. And then I started to get involved in that. But what I didn't realize was what I read in the book. When I tried to apply that to where I live in Barcelona, it didn't work, Mike. It didn't.
Yeah.
It did not work. But you may want to ask a question, and I'm happy to tell you why.
Yeah. Right. So we're going to get into that in a second. But what I find very interesting is the fact that, like, I was also an A student and, had not always done things like the way that you're supposed to do it. Especially now, like, I mean, I'm a former A student. I have a political science bachelor's degree. I have an MBA. I sell title insurance. So I work for a big corporate Fortune 500 title insurance underwriter. But I also do a podcast, which was something that I just did that was kind of like shook it up a little bit. So that was the first time that I kind of shook it up and got out of like, this is how you save money. This is how you approach your sales job. This is how you're supposed to take people to lunch and be very respectful and wear a suit. Yeah, wear a suit, and all that kind of stuff. So was it difficult? I mean, I know that you were frustrated and then you read the book, and obviously, honestly, Rich Dad, Poor Dad has literally been brought up on this show probably like 25 times. If we posted 86 episodes to date, 25 times Rich Dad, Poor Dad has come up on this show. So obviously, if people haven't read that, they probably should. But was it difficult to try to like get out of that mindset, or was just like the frustration so real that you were just like, screw it, this isn't working, I need to do something else?
So, a lot of times, Mike, and this will probably resonate with you, one of the things my parents used to tell me and still tell me to this day is, hey, listen, if something happens to you, Billy, if it happens once, shame on the person that did it to you, that kind of pulled the wool over your eyes. But if the same thing happens twice, then shame on you for not having recognized it the first time and done anything differently. And so when 2008 happened, it was kind of like, well, shame on you. And then when 2008 happened, it was shame on me because I hadn't done anything differently. And so it hurt me so much to look on that piece of paper and realize that I lost 33% of all of the things that I was supposed to do from a retirement perspective. And as an A student that was doing the right thing, the same thing happened twice. And this was like, because I don't come from a family with a lot of money, and I know what it's like to really work hard and just bust your tail to earn every single dime, it hurt me a lot. And I was like, I've got to find a different way to be able to have control. And it was really about being able to have control over the financial part of my life, because that was something that I didn't grow up with a lot of abundance and all this kind of stuff. And so that was something that was really, really important to me, and it hurt. And that was the point where I was like, I've got to do something different. But as someone who is just working in a day job, and I say just working in a day job, I was kind of taught just to continue to work and trade time for money. And it wasn't like Rich Dad Poor Dad was kind of the first time I'd ever heard about, wow, it's like you can actually do this and you don't have to be involved directly, but you can manage it. And as long as you do it, then you can create revenue without actually having to be there. In a very simplistic kind of view, that's the way that I looked at it. But it was not easy, but it hurt enough, Mike, that I figured that I had to do something. And it just, at that time, it was like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Like I guess that was the point that Rich Dad Poor Dad at least came across my mind. And then afterwards, when I finally did pick it up and read it end to end, and then I just started geeking out and listening to podcasts and reading more books and reading more books and reading more books and reading more books. But I was kind of afraid to take action, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is like, we could see all the books for the people watching on YouTube. We could see all the books on the shelf back there. But that is one thing that I think that sometimes if people are in that mindset where they're like, they want to learn everything possible before they take that jump, but it's really just kind of comes down to just doing it. I mean, you could like educate yourself as much as possible, which I'm sure we'll kind of like touch on as we go. But really making the jump and actually taking the leap is the scariest part, but obviously the most important part, right? Like you just got to do it, and that's I think a lot of things, especially with like this show and a lot of the other stuff that I've tried to do over the last couple of years, last year, is just the fact that like I'm just going to try it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, okay, that's fine. It's not like the end of the world, like nothing's going to happen if this podcast doesn't work out. If this email marketing campaign that I'm going to try doesn't work out, who cares? You just got to try it.
Yeah, you know what? One of the things, and I completely agree with you. And even though I recognize that that's one of the things, I still struggled with that, because when you are the A student, when you are this recovering perfectionist, as I call myself, even though you say it, then when you actually have to do it, there's like this like dissonance, and it just kind of creates this frustration inside of you. But it's not until you literally get to the mindset that you're talking about and you say, look, I'm going to lean into this, because every time I lean into something, I'm going to get the feedback that I need. And when you know that you can adapt, then that's when you realize, you know what, the faster that I lean into this, the faster I'm going to get the feedback. And then I can recognize I'm going down the right path, or I've got to pivot. And when I say that you're going down the path, I mean you or your team. Because that's the other thing that I started realizing, is that I don't have to do everything. And usually if it's me doing everything, it means that I'm not going to be able to go as fast as I should, which means I'm not going to lean in as many times as I should, which means I'm not really going to be able to impact the lives that I really want to impact nowadays as quickly as I want to be able to impact them. So, but it is one of those things, Mike, where it's difficult sometimes. It's difficult sometimes, but you have to be able to fail fast, forward, and frequently, and do that in a way that you can learn and pivot. And I'm going through the exact same thing that you're talking about now. Like, hey, look, I'm going to try this. I'm going to put this new camera, or I'm going to try this new email marketing campaign, and sometimes it's going to work, and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's going to go. But you've got to get the feedback so that you can make it right and make it better every single time.
Right. And you could educate yourself as much as possible. And it comes from podcasting, sales, investing, whatever you want to talk about. Like you can learn as much as you want, but unless you actually do something, you're never really going to get that much better. You could be like a little bit better prepared, but I do think that with a lot of things, experience is just the best teacher. You could hear from people, you could read books, you could do all these different things, but until you actually like look at it and make the dive and go for it, you're never really going to know. So let's get back into the story. So you're in Barcelona, you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, you realize this ain't going to work here in Barcelona. Where did you realize that it was going to work? This is such an easy question.
Right. So in the beginning, I didn't even know, man. I was just frustrated. So I was like, hang on a second, everything that I'm reading in the book, I should be able to do this. But then I wasn't sophisticated enough, Mike, to know that there were different types of markets, like, or different types of locations. Like, it's not the same investing in Columbus, Ohio, as it is in Barcelona, Spain, or Morristown in Las Vegas. I mean, every single place is different.
Yeah.
But when you don't know what you don't know, because I wasn't surrounded by people that knew real estate, I'd read a couple books, but just to your point, I didn't have that real life experience or those real life mentors around me. I was kind of like, well, what do I do? Like, this is just not going to work, because I read all this stuff. I had money that I wanted to invest, and I just didn't know what to do. And so a couple of friends of mine that live here in Spain and are Spanish were like, well, Billy, you're a U.S. citizen. Well, yeah. Well, why don't you just buy in the United States? That was their question. And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, what do you mean buy in the United States? I live in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Do you not see the Atlantic Ocean between like where I live and where the like the closest
across the pond, as they say? Yeah.
That would just not work.
Right.
So, one thing led to the next, but after I thought about it and I started looking and then I started understanding and then I started seeing that there were markets, because I was really focused on cash flow at the time. And it was one of those things like, oh, perfect. You know what? I'll just go ahead and be focused on the United States. Kind of left it open. But I had to figure out exactly how I get from the theoretical knowledge that I read in the books to the actual tactical street knowledge of actually making things happen.
Right. Yeah, and let's talk about how like you figured that out, because like you mentioned in that answer, like obviously investing in Columbus, Ohio and Barcelona, Spain, people could see the obvious differences in those. But when you just say I'm going to invest in the United States is pretty big, It's bigger than like all of Europe, right? It's like it's huge. So like, I mean, and you use the example of Vegas to Morristown. There's a lot of differences between Vegas and Morristown. I'm going to Vegas for the first time in August. So if you have any tips, let me know. Actually, I will have gotten back by the time this episode posts. So you better give them to me now. So Billy gave me great tips for Vegas, and if anybody needs them. But so talk to me about like how you actually put that knowledge into practice and kind of where, if you had like a plan about where you were going to start this process in investing back home.
Yeah, so I guess in the beginnings, and it's just the reality of kind of getting started. I didn't know what I didn't know. So, and I had no sophistication. I just knew that I had the money, and the only way that I selected the location that I actually invested in is because I had family in the area. My thought process, Mike, was, hey, look, if this whole thing, it just goes really, really south, like goes super bad, like I want to at least be able to pick up the phone and call a family member and say, please get the keys to this place, take it back to the bank, and we just can't, I can't do anything else, right? Yeah. Or if something was happening, I could at least call them and they would go over and they would check things out. So I had the money. I wanted a property to create cash flow, and I needed it to be in a place where if all else failed, somebody could bail me out. It didn't get any more sophisticated than that. Nothing, like literally that was it. But what happened was, when I bought my very first property. And my very first property, it was such a positive experience for me because I was focused on the money. And that was what I was focused on in the beginning. And because I was making money, I decided I wanted to buy another one. And then I bought this other small property. Like, I mean, just to kind of, I don't know if you talk a lot about the numbers and stuff like that, but just to give you an idea, like the very first property I purchased, it was a property that was on the market for about $100,000. It was a duplex. I bought it for $77,000. I ended up putting another $20,000 into it. And then after that, Mike, I ended up renting the each side. It was a duplex for $1,400 a side. And my mortgage was $260. And so,
is this in Columbus?
No, this is in Jersey, in New Jersey, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so when I bought this, it was such a positive experience because I was focused on the money. I wanted to get another one.
Yeah.
But what happened after about 6 months is things started not what it didn't even take 6 months, but I didn't have a handyman, I didn't have a general contractor, I didn't have anybody there to actually help and make sure that my residents were taken care of. So when they started having requests and we didn't have those systems in place to actually handle their requests, that created some friction, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm very clear on why it created friction, because I was living in Spain, the residents were living in the place day after day, and so we had to get an answering system, right? Because that answering system was the mechanism to allow them to give a call, and then that call went to email and SMS, which got to me in Spain, and it came all hours of the day, all hours of the night. And I started realizing, you know what, we need to get a better system in place, because although we get the idea, I need to make sure that I'm not getting a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, which was 9 o'clock in New Jersey. And I needed to make sure that they got what they needed. And so from there, it was about putting the right systems in place, making sure that eventually we were able to not only react properly to what our residents needed, but also we were proactive in making sure like things like the lawn was cut in the summertime so that the property always looked nice and respectable and things like that. And you don't actually learn that until you get involved. And it goes back to the thing that you're talking about, experience. And so now when I'm looking for the right who, meaning the right team of people to manage the different situations or the different types of assets that we're purchasing, and that could be anything from residential properties to, and now I'm really focused on large pieces of energy equipment, because that helps to solve a problem that I used to have that people that are investing with me are now solving. But now it's about making sure that we have the right people on the bus so that we can serve our investors, serve our residents, serve our clients.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because we've had a bunch of people on the show that invest in real estate in different parts of the country. Some will go see them, meet the team that's actually working on that property, where it's the property manager, the actual construction guys that are, building or, renovating the property, whatever it is. But there's other people that have come on the show that live here in the United States, but have never seen the properties that they've invested in, because they just invest in different parts of the country, and like, even if I lived here in Morristown and and bought a property on the other side of town and never went and saw it, it's still kind of the same thing. I mean, I have a better opportunity to go see it, and maybe I drive by it one day. You're never going to drive by it, but it's still the same concept. So how do you assemble, like, how did you figure out how to assemble that team? Was it just like interviewing people like we're doing here on Zoom and figuring out if they vibe with you? I mean, how do you do that? Because obviously not meeting somebody in person leaves a lot, on the table. Like, you really don't know because you've never actually met this person in person. Like, so how does that work?
So one of the things that I believe this whole situation with the pandemic and COVID has helped people to realize is that, right, I've been doing Zoom for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, right? Because that, as a long distance investor, that was just one of the things that you have to do. Because when you want to build a team, you have to build a relationship. And when you want to build a relationship, you should, in my opinion, you must invest time. Because if the relationship, or when the relationship is the right relationship, you have to invest time in the relationship. And it's no different than a business partner, than a really great friend, to your life partner, right? It's all the same. I see it as exactly the same way, because at the end of the day, it has a starting point. And whether you met someone online through a real estate investment group, you may have met them at a title insurance conference, and you see that they have a very similar idea about life as you do. They may be part of a certain ecosystem. And so you recognize, like, you want to invest time in that relationship. And so you invest time. You see if the other person wants to invest time, because it's no good if you just want to invest time and they don't have any interest. Well, guess what? You need to go on and go to someone else who wants to reciprocate. And you can start online, and eventually, depending on the size of the portfolio that you want to build or how serious you want to take your investing career, you have to put your money where your mouth is, I believe, Mike, because you can do as much as you want online, but usually if the relationship is important enough, or the value of the assets are important enough, you're going to start online, you're going to email, you're going to phone call, you're going to WhatsApp, and eventually you're going to get on an airplane and fly to meet that person. Because if that person or that team is managing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of assets, it's probably a good thing for you or someone from your team, once again, to go out and meet the other team members that are part of it. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But it's just like any other great relationship. It takes time, and you're going to get to a point where, yeah, you don't have to actually see each other all the time, but you do need to have touch points, and it has to start somewhere. There has to be a mutual consent to develop the relationship, and then you have to be able to get mutual benefit out of the relationship, i.e., getting closer to your goals, and whether that is additional free time, avoiding things that you don't want to really have to do, which is why you're hiring a certain property management company. You want to make more money, you want to save more money, whatever the case may be. That's the way that I view it, is like any other relationship as you build this team.
Right. Yeah. So talk to me more. So as we progress through this, so you figure out I need a team, and you go through those, processes and assemble these teams. I'm assuming in different parts of the country, right?
Yes, well, or in the locations that you think are the most appropriate, right? So
Right.
I'll give you an idea. So, and we'll specifically, because I was in New Jersey, and then after that, I really, the thing that I got really clear on, Mike, was you can't just have money and buy deals. That's what a lot of people do. Like, I've got this money, I want to buy this deal. I've got enough money, I want to buy this deal. The returns are great, blah, 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 blah. And then you did like I did, because I bought something that I had money to buy, and then I didn't have a team. So I was scrambling, stressed out, frustrated. I had to build a team, but I was building a team while the plane was already in. It's like building a plane while it's already in the air, like shaking that, right? Because
Right.
you're at that point, you have to make decisions under stress because you have a problem that you're trying to solve. So you're not necessarily building the right relationships in the right ways.
Yeah.
Or you may feel that you're being taken advantage of because they're having to charge you extra rates or whatever the case may be. And then afterwards, I started realizing, am I even in the right location that is going to give me what it is that I'm trying to get, which was cash flow at the time? Fortunately, I was in that place. But then what I've now started helping people to understand is you have to do it the opposite way of how I did it. And first and foremost, you have to get crystal clear on what it is that you want the investment of your time to provide you. And that means, especially when we're talking about real estate or any kind of assets, right, is do you want it to provide you cash flow? Do you want it to provide you some type of equity buildup over time? Do you want it to provide you some type of appreciation so that you can massively gain wealth over a certain amount of time? Or do you want it to give you some type of tax benefit? You want it to help you save more time? Whatever the case may be crystal clear on why you're investing your time and your capital in this particular asset. After that, you want to go to the location that is going to give you the highest probability of achieving whatever that personal goal is. Because then once you're in that location, that's when you have to build a team. And this is coming to the part of your question. And you have to make sure that your team understands the location, meaning that they have a great ecosystem, that they have the right broker, that they have the right insurance agent, the right title agent, which is obviously Mike, and that they have all of the different members of the team, or as many as possible, because the A players want to run with other A players. And then after that, Mike, you can buy whatever opportunity you want, whether that's a 100-unit apartment building, if it's a piece of energy equipment, which is what I'm doing now, if it's an ATM machine, if it's whatever, everything is then aligned. And so that is what makes being able to scale much more, it makes it much more of a reality, like you can scale. And so when you come back to the team, and this is the part you were asking about, is once the team understands the location and they understand the types of opportunities that you want, you have to make sure that the team is also the type of team that wants to serve your client. And I'll give you an example of like a restaurant. Like, you like to eat, Mike?
Oh yeah. You can only see me from like here up, so you can't see what's going on down below. So yeah,
All
it's
right.
a
Well, I
disaster.
like to eat. I like to eat too, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been really, really fortunate. Had some really nice like Michelin dining food, and been to 1-star, 2-star, 3-star Michelin restaurant, right? And so there you have this really cool, well-dressed maitre d' who's helping you and making sure that you're getting all of your different 7 plates or whatever the case may be, but it's a certain type of experience. At the same time, I also like going to fast food restaurants. And
Me too.
so many of the fast food restaurants, whether it's McDonald's or it's Burger King or whatever your fast food restaurant is, when you go in, you have a certain type of experience as well. But it would be really, really weird if you went to McDonald's and you saw the maitre d' welcoming you when you walked in the door, or you go to the 3-star Michelin restaurant and you saw someone in the McDonald's suit welcoming you to your dining, right? And
Yeah, right.
it's the same thing with your team. It doesn't matter because both of the restaurants serve food and they serve a purpose, but the service and the way that they go about doing it is very different. So when you're building your team, you have to make sure that your team understands the person that you want to be able to serve, and that they are an equipped team to be able to serve the resident, the tenant, the investor, the client in the way that you want them served. Because if you don't have the team aligned in the right way and vet them appropriately, then you can have a really, really bad experience for the people that want to be aligned with you. And that's
Right.
that's where that's why you have to be really clear on what it is you want to be able to do and who you want to be able to serve, and make sure that you're vetting the team, that they understand your end client. Hopefully
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just interesting because, looking at different markets and understanding, where, every area of the country is going to have teams that look a lot different just because, like you said, I mean, they're more connected with people that live in that area. Like people from Jersey are a lot different than people maybe in Florida, that are a lot of people that are different in Ohio and California and all these different places. So you need to be able to connect with a lot of different people depending on where you're investing and all that kind of stuff. But you need to understand that maybe you don't like vibe totally just because like you may be from different parts of the country, but at the same time that person might be the perfect person for the job because they're so tied in to the community and the people there and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's very interesting. So we were talking earlier about, you described your investing process as nutty, and I said, well, we'll call it off the beaten path. So can you explain why you would say that this type of investing process is different?
Yeah, so I think it's the norm, but most people that see and talk about it were like, Billy, how can you ever invest beyond your backyard? And my whole thing is, I never thought that it was possible either, Mike, because I never gave myself the possibility to think that way. I didn't even understand, I didn't know real estate, so I didn't come from that type of background. But when I gave myself the opportunity to really think about how applicable it was to get the end result, which was control over a part of my financial life that I'd already given up to a person at an 1-800 number that didn't know me from the next person that was going to call the number when I hung up in 3 minutes and 47 seconds, because that person had to get on to the next call because that's one of their metrics. When that started happening, then it was a matter of saying, okay, well, this is how I want to continue. Like, this is the way that I want to be able to build my business. And it doesn't matter where I live in the world. So although I live in Barcelona, Spain, what makes the most sense for me, for my family, and the results that I'm looking to achieve is to invest in a market that can create cash flow and create strong tax benefits. Because one of the things that I've recognized also is when you're in the corporate mentality and you're in the A student mentality, it is how much money can I make? Like, I want to make more money. I want to get a big raise. I want to get a big increase at the end of the year. And what you start realizing is it's not about how much money you make. It's about how much money you keep. Because when you keep the money always has a purpose. Like, money should always be flowing. And so I wanted to go to a location which provided those two things, cash flow and great tax benefit. And so that is why, although I love living in Europe, what really makes the most sense for me for the portion of my portfolio where I want to have more control is to invest long distance in the United States.
Right.
And it's something that I've been doing now for over 7 years. And it's something that I really enjoy. And the more and more that I talk to people about it, I say it's long distance investing because I happen to do it from one continent to the next. But to your point earlier, Mike, you may live on one side of, you may live in North Jersey and invest in South Jersey. Well,
Yep.
that's 2.5 hours away. You can't, it's not in your backyard. You can't go there every single day. You have to have the right systems in place. You have to make sure that you are doing things in the right way that's compliant with city code and city ordinance. You have to make sure that your team is in place. You may like your day job and you want to continue to do your day job, but you want to passively invest in other locations that, when you're in New Jersey, maybe you want to invest in Ohio, or maybe you want to invest in Florida, or maybe you want to invest in Texas because you have the right team in place and it fits in exactly what you want to be able to do. So that's why I think it's the norm. It's also one of the things that helps me as a kind of a control freak. When I can't see the property every day, it means I have to focus on the process as well.
Yeah.
and making sure that the teams are there and doing what needs to be done versus me walking around a property every single day, not really knowing what I'm doing anyway, just so that I feel like I have even more control. So I know I went in a couple different directions, but hopefully that gives you a reason as to why I think it's the norm. And some people would say, well, why in the world would you ever invest beyond your backyard? And I fundamentally believe that you have more freedom of time when you give yourself at least that as an option.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Because then it just forces you to take it off of your plate. You know, I mean, like you talk about the team a lot over the course of this episode. And I always like to joke that I'm head chef and chief bottle washer over here at the Morning Spotlight because I do it all. I'm here recording with you. I'm going to edit this episode. I'm going to market the hell out of it. I'm going to put all those things together. But if I had a team, you know, maybe that changes how I operate and forces me to focus on other things, you know, whether it's, you know, doing more and more interviews or whatever it is. But, you know, this isn't about me. We're talking about you. So,
Actually, you know, can we stop there just for a quick
yeah,
second? I think that there's an evolution, right? Because even if I think about my own podcast, in the beginning, there was one thing that I knew that I would never do, and that was doing the post production because that's just not a skill set that I have. And so I knew from the very beginning that I couldn't. Every single thing else in the beginning, I was doing. I was looking up the guests, I was creating the notes, I was doing the interviews before, I was writing things up at the end. And it got to a point where I wasn't able to move fast enough. And so once I realized that I had a process in place, and then I had the process documented, I created standard operating procedures. Then after doing 60, 70 episodes, brought somebody else on to actually start to do the things that I was doing they're still value add, but I would just like being able to have the conversations with people. And so being able to document things, put little videos together, that's freed up so much more of my time
right.
that I get a chance to, you know, spend more of the time doing the episodes. But it's part of an evolution. I think when you do the episodes or anything, like we're just talking about a podcast, but it may be the same thing in real estate investing. When you get started in real estate investing, you need to take the reps. Like you have to, I believe you should go through the reps. And then when you go through the reps, you actually understand more when it's time to hand it off to the next person because you know what you want done, how you want it done. You're open to doing things better. I constantly am challenged by my team to doing things in a more efficient, more effective way. But if you don't know how to at least do some of the basics, it makes it really, really difficult. So I think getting started and kind of doing the chief everything officer, it's the norm. Eventually, because from this podcast, you're going to have to do things differently because you're expanding it. So
Right.
it's part of the process, man.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I think that, like you said, I mean, it's the same thing on the real estate side. I mean, like when I first started in title insurance, I knew what my job was, but I did not know like the extent of what has to happen behind the scenes and putting together the commitment and the closing and all these kinds of things. And then just the more I started trying to just learn and like talk to people and ask the right questions and all that kind of stuff. Granted, it wasn't my job, so they weren't going to be like, "Here, do it," because things would go crazy and haywire. But you know, it was just like the more I just forced myself to understand more about the process, then coming back to it, I can answer questions more effectively to clients. If I realize that maybe searches aren't back right away or as back as soon as they should be, or something's been sitting in the pipeline for a little bit too long, I know who to call. I know how to get the ball rolling, all that kind of stuff, how to, you know, like I said, answer the client's questions, all that kind of stuff. So definitely knowing how the process works and what each person's job is imperative, especially when we're talking about teams and all that kind of stuff. So at what point in this process did you say to yourself, you know, like I have you know, a good handle on my off the beaten path type of investing. Now I need to take this and I need to help people you know, also do it. Like I've learned, I've gone through my experiences. Now I want to share my experiences with others and help them do what I did.
You know what started happening? It was kind of organic because I was super excited about the properties that I was buying. And so as I was buying the properties, I was learning things. And I took a lot of that theory and I put it into practice. I was doing my underwriting. I was figuring out kind of where I thought things were. I had my pro formas. And then as things started to become real, I was actually seeing where I was against pro forma. As friends would come over to the house, I'd tell them about, you know, things that happened. I made a huge mistake and it cost me about $25,000 because I didn't read a home inspection report that I actually did. Like that was just not a very good thing for me because it clearly said that there was some roof issues with the roof, and I didn't do any of that stuff. So as I kind of went through that, it was organic because I was talking to people, and as I was answering questions, I started recognizing that people were interested. And I actually had a couple people, Mike, that were asking me if they could invest with me. But where I come from, you didn't mix friends and money. That was like a bad thing, right? Because I've seen family members, friends in relationships over money. And so I intentionally did not go down that path initially because it just scared me, right? And I didn't want to end any of the friendships. But when I started realizing that people were interested in the things that I was learning, I started realizing, wow, man, this is actually kind of cool. And I always have liked coaching and teaching and things like that. And so I had a mentor at the time say, hey, look, if you want to continue to go out and potentially build a community, you need to do things like build a website and share the things that you know. And I did a YouTube channel and an Instagram and Facebook and all this kind of stuff. But it happened really organically. It wasn't really intentional in the beginning. It was just because I was having a positive experience and I wanted to share, and I was sharing with all of my friends. I was like, completely geeking out, and this is happening, and this is great. And because of the responses that they were giving me, I knew that there was something there. And eventually, those friends that asked if they could invest with me, and I told them no for a while, I remember, I'll never forget this day. I was on a phone call with attorneys from Spain, accountants from Spain, accountant and attorney from the United States. And I was like, oh my gosh, how many people on this? How much is this actually costing me? But what it helped to do was actually put the infrastructure in place to be able to raise capital. And all of that came together. And now we're in a position now where we're able to help people by raising capital and having people participate in some of the projects. So actually getting started was organic. Then it became much more intentional. And all of the time I've been doing this while I'm working a day job, right? And so it is pretty busy. I'm also married with 2 kids, and I love being able to spend time with the family and building this business at the same time. So it's been fun. It's a lot. It's also exciting when you can see other people that are like, hey, I'm glad that you made this video, or I'm glad we got a chance to talk, or you helped me think about this in a particular way, and I wasn't thinking about it that way. And it's something that I enjoy doing. I mean, I've even done that in sales and sales leadership for the last 24 years in my corporate role, and being able to use a lot of those same skills, Mike, and doing that to build my own business and affect other people's lives positively is a really cool thing.
Right. Yeah. All right. So I have a couple more questions, and then I'm gonna let you go because I said I would keep you for an hour. We're like right at an hour. So, all right. Cool. So talk to me. So one of the things that you said in that answer was the fact that you work a corporate job. So you work a 9 to 5. You basically, I mean, I would argue that you are running your own business as well. Like, this is a business that you run. You manage a team that creates money. Like that's what this is. We have a lot of people that listen to the show. The majority of my listeners are between the ages of 25 and 35. So they are either entrepreneurs, they're either new to real estate investing, they're either working corporate jobs, like maybe somebody like me that is interested in getting involved in real estate investing. So how would you suggest that people that are maybe in that age bracket that have maybe a similar, early setup that you may have had when you first started this corporate job and now this other thing, what are maybe some words of advice, or like how to get started down this path to go about it the most effective way?
So continue to listen and watch the morning spotlight.
Obviously.
Like, that's the first thing that you must continue to do. And also, don't just stop there. Like, when Mike recommends that you do something, when Mike recommends that you reach out to someone, when Mike recommends that you take action, do it. Like, because you can't just sit here and be on the treadmill or cook your dinner or watch on YouTube and just listen to all the great content that he's putting together and helping you to move forward and not do anything with it. So continue to be here and take action. Like, I think a lot of times, Mike, we try to make things like these amazing plans and all this kind of stuff, and it's really just basic stuff. Like, you're already here, you're listening and watching Mike consistently because he's putting out valuable content that's helping you move forward. So listen and take action. We were talking about earlier, get the feedback. The feedback is going to let you know if you're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. And if you're interested in actually finding out if things are working, like, you have to eventually, if you really are serious about being an investor, you are going to have to give of your time and of your capital. Like you're going to have to put money towards certain things. You have to make the bet as to, and I say the bet, like where is the right place for you to start? The basic thing should always be education. Because if you don't have the basic education to do what you need to do, you will be completely frustrated because you won't know what to even do. It's like asking someone to do complex algebra if you don't even know how to add and subtract. You kind of have to have some basics before you can move forward. So continue to listen here. Listen to what Mike is asking you to do. When he's asking you to take action, and make sure that you get educated on the path that you want to take. And when you hear people that are here on the podcast and the video cast, and they have something that resonates with you, also be able to follow them, listen to what they're saying. Because I mean, it's one of the reasons Mike has them on the show, is to help you become the best version or the next version of yourself. So
right.
I would keep it simple as that, Mike.
Yeah, no, I love that. This show has been plugged more in this one episode than I think it's ever been plugged in a year of doing it, over a year by the time this posts. So appreciative of that. So talk to me. We'll talk about the podcast because it's called Going Along with Billy Keels, right? Did I get that right? Yep.
Yeah, you did.
So what was the purpose behind starting the podcast? Was it to grow the network? Was it I just need a creative outlet, or what was the purpose behind the podcast?
Yeah, so a couple things. I had been saying that I wanted to do a podcast for probably 3 years, and I kept coming up with every excuse in the book. I'm working a really busy day job. It's demanding. I make a lot of money. I shouldn't be doing this, blah, or whatever. And then the pandemic hit us all. And so I haven't really told this story, so I'll tell this. So I was planning on starting the podcast in 2020 anyway, but I did my very first interview in January of 2020, and then I got busy. And it wasn't until April of 2020 that I did the second interview. And the only reason I did the second interview is because I really had a conversation with myself, which is, are you going to do this podcast thing or not? Because if you're not going to do it, then just stop it. Call the person that did the first interview. And so thank you, Tyler Chef. And if not, then you're just going to cancel it and call back and say, look, I'm not going to do this. But I couldn't accept that. And so I got really honest. I talked to my wife. I was like, look, I want to start this podcast. And they made huge sacrifices, my wife and the kids, because we were at home during the pandemic, and I was filming and having these conversations in the living room. And so they literally had to go to the other side of the flat because we're in Europe and we've got, limited space and stuff like that. And so they were on the other side of the flat. And it was one of those things where I wanted to do it because it's something I told myself I wanted to do anyway. I wanted to be able to continue to connect and network with other fantastic people within the ecosystem of investing. Originally it was real estate, but now it is real assets or any tangible assets. And also be able to build my expertise, because a lot of times, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Mike, there are certain moments when you have guests on your program and you think, wow, if I actually had to just hire this person as a coach to ask these questions, this would be a pretty hefty investment.
Yeah.
But when they're on the show here with you and they're sharing their expertise and you get a chance to ask on behalf of all of your audience, it's a pretty amazing platform to be able to grow personally, grow professionally, and grow your network, and also build your own family, or many people would say tribe. So those are some of the reasons that I did it. And I would have never been able to do it if my wife and my 2 sons weren't patient with me and quiet in the house and stuff like that. So the podcast is the Going Along podcast with Billy Keels. It's something that really, really happy about. We're just I guess we've done over 130 some odd episodes at this point, and it's just been it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're 100% right. Like the people that I've had on, so I do 2 episodes a week. One is usually real estate specific. The other is different, so we've had on athletes and, musicians and other podcasters. It's just other people that I find interesting outside of the real estate world. And you were talking about before, like traveling and experiencing other cultures and experiencing other, places, having people on that have experienced a lot of different life experiences than me, I think has helped me grow just as a person and be able to talk to people from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different parts of the country, a lot of different parts of the world. So it's just a cool way to try to like grow and learn different things, whether it's real estate or not. You just become better, and like your network grows, and it's just phenomenal. So yeah, big podcast fan, obviously. So let's talk about the last question before we get into our closing segment. We're going to talk about goals, because that's one thing that I always talk about with everybody on this show is goals. So what are some things that you're hoping to accomplish? We could even just keep it to the investing side, over the course of the next year.
So a couple of things that I will accomplish over the next year is one is really being able to help. My goal is I will help at a minimum 50 other accredited investors get closer to their own goals and dreams through becoming a part of our family, which is part of the KeePon or Billy Keels, and being able to invest in and through our most recent 506c, which is for accredited investors, which is through pieces of carbon capture equipment, which are really helping a lot of big companies, a lot of big energy companies do their part in being socially responsible and help with the Paris Agreement. And at the same time, being able to be profitable and helping people that have really high tax obligations. So that's the goal that we're going to accomplish as a company, at least 50 other people. And and so that's like the big thing that we're going to accomplish as a company.
Right. I love that. What are you hoping to accomplish? No, we're gonna do this. Yeah. It's the mindset side of it too. So all right. So we're gonna move the show into our closing segment, which we call Under the Spotlight. So the spotlighters have been listening to Mike Ham and Billy Keels talk for about an hour. So what would be one thing that you would hope that they walk away from this episode with? So you are under the spotlight.
Yeah. The biggest thing, and Mike, you and I have been open and honest. I guess your audience knows you a lot more. They're getting to know me today as someone who is a recovering perfectionist and a student that has done things well in life. And sometimes when you're doing new things, you get into this analysis paralysis or maybe this fear of not being able to do it. I was talking to somebody earlier today that was thinking about launching a podcast, was in a very similar situation that I was. And I said, look, you can't get caught up in your own head. It's not going to be right the first time you do it. It's not going to be right the second time or the fifth time. It is going to be much better the 50th time that you do it. So don't stress yourself out until you've done the reps. Like nobody goes to the gym and says, I'm going to do one push-up and then I'm going to walk out and be absolutely perfect and I don't have to do anything else.
Right.
So although you know it mentally in your mind, give yourself the freedom to be okay with making some mistakes, but you have to take action. Like it literally does you no good to just continue to consume content. You must take action if you want to get to new goals in your life. And so being under the spotlight, that is the one thing I would say is anyone who's a recovering perfectionist, anyone who's listening to this, who's been on this and watching and listen for long enough, like now is the moment for you to start to take action, to recognize whether or not you want to continue down this path, you want to accelerate down this path, so that you know if the goals that you put in front of yourself are the ones that you really want to go out and achieve. But take action.
Right. Love it. I think take action is a perfect way to wrap a nice little bow around this entire episode. So let's hit them with the links. If people want more Billy, where can they go to get more Billy?
Yeah. So, and hey, by the way, and one of the things that we can say is for those of you that are watching this on the video, so we're trying something new today as well. And so the video is great. It's fun. And so every once in a while you'll see me bouncing in and out and all that kind of jazz. So Mike, thank you for
no problem.
being patient with me as well. So yeah, where can people find out more? You can definitely go and check out billykeels.com. And if you want to go to billykeels.com /7 mistakes to avoid, what I've done is put as a long distance investor kind of the biggest mistakes that you can avoid so that you can get to your success sooner and faster. And you can download that for free. And if you also go to LinkedIn, do me a favor, reach out on LinkedIn. I love being there on LinkedIn. Mike and I connected there. And one of the things that I would say is please make sure that you reference that you heard Mike and I speaking here on the Morning Spotlight, because it's just going to make the conversation so much easier when we continue it from there. And it's one of the things I'll definitely come back to Mike and say, hey, listen, your audience, your family's fantastic. They reached out and things like that. So those are great ways. And then also too, if anybody wants to actually just get on a call and talk, you can go to bit.ly/speak with Billy. And with that, man, Mike, listen, there's a bunch of other ways, but I'm sure you'll include those in the show notes.
Of course.
And I love what you're doing here, man. I love your energy. I love your curiosity, and it's phenomenal. Keep on doing this fantastic work and continue to impact people's lives, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your tribe today.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on, and just I'll hit him with my links real quick. So themorningspotlight.com is the website. themorningspotlight@gmail.com is the email address. I will do my formal thank you. Billy, thank you so much for coming on with us today. I know I put a lot of pressure on you at the beginning because I said that this had to live up to our initial conversation, but this further exceeded it. It was both educational and entertaining. So I really appreciate you coming on with us today.
All right. Thank you very much, my friend.
Of course. And the Spotlighters, thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.